Well, I think today the US are far ahead of China when it comes to AI. I mean, Nvidia is a good example of that, of course. Everyone in China wants to buy chips from Nvidia. If you look at the ecosystem, also 80% of the most advanced chips are bought in the United States. So I think that the ecosystem in the United States is extremely strong when it comes to AI. I think companies like Google, Meta, Microsoft, I forget some of them, are going to drive, I would say, the development of AI very, very strongly.
Does Europe become a consumer of US and Chinese AI, or a producer and builder of AI?
Today, I think this is clearly a consumer. If you look at the overall AI ecosystem in Europe, it's very weak in any way you look at it. And, you know, today there could be a debate about will the US or China win the AI race. I think it's clear who is losing it today. It's Europe. Europe is behind. And it's true with semiconductor, right? If you look at semiconductor, basically, take our shipment. The shipment of our system to Europe today is maybe 1 or 2% of our total business. And that's been the case for the last 10 years. So there is no buildup of semiconductor manufacturing in Europe, not advanced, not mature. Why is that? Is because there is also no consumption of semiconductor in Europe. Most of the consumption, as I said, of advanced chips are in the US because the company that develop the AI chips are not here. So Europe is behind, and to catch up, Europe has to create the condition basically to attract this entire ecosystem back to Europe.
ASML has no plans to leave the Netherlands, its home for over 40 years, but as the AI revolution unfolds, with the US well ahead and China making an aggressive effort to catch up, is it a case of too little too late for Europe?
I get from you speaking to you that you are genuinely concerned that Europe is losing this AI race. Is that fair? And what are the implications of a Europe that loses on this?
Well, I think the implication is that we become consumers, as you said before. So we will have access to the technology. We may even have some data centers that are built in Europe, here and there. But the knowledge will not be here for most of it. So that's the concern. We talk a lot about sovereignty in Europe. If you want sovereignty, you need to make sure that you are going to play not on one part of the ecosystem.
And you talked about the role of China, and we've been reminded of how closely linked we are to the supply chains of China in recent weeks and months, where it's rare earths or the kind of chips, legacy chips that the auto industry, for example, is so dependent on, companies like Nexperia, Chinese-owned, but based in the Netherlands. On rare earths, is there ever a place where Europe is not dependent on China on rare earths?
It's difficult for me to say because I'm not an expert there. I think that, you know, most probably we need to develop a much bigger supply chain, so maybe not depending fully on China. I don't know how much we have in Europe, so that's also why it's important to keep some of those markets open. I think you're right. The interdependencies we have between, you know, us, China, the US, is being reminded to us every day, right? As everyday example of that. So we have to also work a bit harder to make sure that the market remains open.
And in the past, you've been an advocate for continuing to have exposure to the Chinese market. It's still obviously a significant market for ASML.
Yes.
And your case is we should be providing that technology. Otherwise, China's going to become competitive and start to take that market share. Is that still where you would land on that debate?
Well, it's back to the race, right? So China will not accept to be cut off from technology, right? If you have 1.4 billion people, you want to advance. So this is just a reality. Then I think the West could make the choice to continue to keep China behind by saying, well, we're not going to provide them the latest and greatest product, but, you know, we could provide the third, the fourth, or the fifth generation. Today, the product we ship to China are 8 generations behind our INA tool we talked about it. So we're quite far behind. The tool we ship to China, we were shipping to our customer in the Western world in 2013, 2014. So it's more than 10 years. And China, of course, is suffering from that. Their technology progress has slowed down. Now the question is, how far do you push that? Do we keep them behind 5, 10, 15 years? Not for me to decide. Or do we frustrate them to the point where they have no choice but to stop depending on Western technology, which for us, it means on the long term, that part of the trade is gone. They develop their own product, which they have done already for many things, and at some point of time, they could even come back to us and sell those products. So I think it's mostly time to find the right balance between, the frustration, the delay, and what could be the consequence of that. And I think that the right question is most probably, how far behind do we want China to be?